In 1803, we the people of the United States purchased some land. The seller was Napoleon Bonaparte. The buyer, the purchasing agent for us, was Thomas Jefferson. The land's known as the Louisiana Purchase. You may remember hearing about that in school, those of you that were good students. It was quite a lot of land, some 828,000 square miles. 828,000 square miles. But we got it for a good deal, just $18 per mile. Yeah. And there's a lot of background to that. You know, it encompasses some or all of 10 different states of the United States. And after purchasing that, and that purchase kind of filled in the gap between the East Coast and what was already happening out west. And which wasn't a lot, but there was out in California, kind of coming from the other direction already, some settling that was taking place. And after purchasing that, Thomas Jefferson commissioned Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to head up a special military unit called the Corps of Discovery. I love that name, the Corps of Discovery, to explore that westward expansion, everything basically west of the Mississippi River. That Lewis and Clark expedition is one of the most famous expeditions that ever occurred in history. It lasted over 2 years through some very harsh weather, some unforgiving terrain, treacherous waters, with injuries, near starvation, disease, and encountering both friendly and hostile Indians. The results were they produced some invaluable maps, some of which, up until modern map making time, were the most accurate ever produced of the United States. They made some great scientific accomplishments, discoveries, especially in the field of biology and geographical and ecological findings. They identified at least 120 animal specimens and 200 botanical samples. And they initiated peaceful relations with many of the different Indian tribes. It was a great accomplishment, and it was a great expedition that was one of these things that just changed our country. Much of what followed could not have happened had it not been for what they did. Expedition, exploration, journey, discovery, those things are all built into the DNA of America. We celebrate it. We celebrate our discovery by Columbus. Not a lot of countries can actually recognize their discovery, but we do that. We recognize and discover and celebrate it. We celebrate the pilgrimage of the colonist here to start a new life in a new land. We celebrate the voyage of the steady wave of immigrants from that time forward, continuing into present day. We celebrate the explorers and pioneers of the frontier, and the constant migrations of people within the regions. It's part, again, of who we are. People have moved from south to north and back to south again, from east to west and all over. Journeying, travel, discovery. It's who we are. Some people have made those journeys in the course of our history, excitedly looking to new opportunities, looking to start a new life. Others made those journeys here with great fear, with great sadness. Sadness for leaving the people at home. Trepidation about not knowing what they'd really encounter. Would they be successful? Would they find a better life, or would instead it all be even worse than what they had come from? Would they make it at all, or would they somehow be lost along the way? Would they suffer shipwreck, be crashed on the rocks? It was probably a mix of emotions for most that traveled here, a bit of both. Some embarked on their voyage here in great luxury and style. Many more, probably most, instead endured great hardship. Some pursued riches and a new life, and some, having got here, just wandered aimlessly. And the worst passages here were taken by those who did not choose at all, but rather were forced to come here in chains. But no matter how people traveled here, no matter how people got here, those journeys changed their lives. We've explored our country from coast to coast, from the highest mountains to the deepest sea. We've done so over land, air, and sea, by foot, by horseback, by rail, by car, and by plane. And not even the sky itself has been the limit as we continue to dream to boldly go where no man has gone before. Some Trekkies here. We have explored in our explorations even space itself, something as vast as all of space, and something as small as the division of the atom. And all of these explorations and all of these discoveries have in some way impacted the lives of people tremendously. It is often said that life is a journey, and so it is. Life is a journey for all, but the greatest journey that anyone will take, the journey that holds the greatest promise, the journey that can bring the greatest reward, is the spiritual journey for those who are brave enough to take that. Turn to Genesis chapter 12. There was a man named Abraham who embarked on a journey, and it certainly changed his life and all of those that came from his line. In Genesis chapter 12, in verse 1, now the Lord said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. At the age of 75, as you continue to read, at the age of 75, God tells Abraham, I want you to move. I want you to go on a journey. He invites him to take a journey to a new land, a place that he's never been, a place where he will be a stranger in a strange land. And God promises him that this will be something wonderful. And not knowing where he's going, not knowing what it's like, Abraham takes off. That would be hard for any of us, wouldn't it, if you were asked to journey to a place that you'd never been? But for Abraham to do this is really, really crazy, because this is the very beginning of civilization. He is leaving the cradle of civilization to wander out into who knows what. You know, Lewis and Clark encountered some wild and crazy things. Things that when they wrote back about, people didn't even believe. Nobody had seen a grizzly bear until Lewis and Clark, okay? A bear to them was like, around here, these little brown bears that, not that I really want one to come to my tent, but, you bang some pans, you chase them away. A grizzly bear, that's like a monster. But Abraham, he had no idea what he was going to come across. And there he is taking off, just trusting God to take that journey. He travels. And if we had the time, I'd go through all of his travels, and I'd go through lots of Genesis. I enjoyed reading it, and I invite you to read Genesis sometime if you haven't read it many times already. And if it's been a while, read it again. It's so much fun. But Abraham takes off, and the things he encounters. First of all, when he gets to that land, if anybody had good reason to think, boy, I made a mistake, it was Abraham. Because he no sooner gets to that land than God says, you know what, now that you're here, you need to go to Egypt because there's a famine in this land. Now, I think the natural reaction to that would be, well, then why'd you tell me to come when you told me to come in the first place, God? Or did I really hear from God? Or am I just crazy? Nonetheless, Abraham stays faithful. And all these different things happen in the life of Abraham. And then he has a son, Isaac, and Isaac has a son, Jacob. And Jacob has 12 sons that turn into an entire nation. And one of those sons, we spent some time recently studying the life of Joseph. And under Joseph, this whole nation leaves that land and they go to Egypt, where it saves them and things are wonderful until they're not. And then they become enslaved. They become enslaved. And they spend 400 years. Isn't it 400 years? I think so. Well, again, read Genesis. Exodus now too. In that bondage until God sends Moses to bring them out. And they come out. And God has Moses lead them in a relatively short time. Could have been even shorter if he didn't have to kind of take a detour so that these guys didn't go past another strong country that would have freaked them out because they'd be afraid of them. So he takes them on a little bit of a detour, and he takes them to the promised land. And you know what happens when they get there? They say, oh, we're afraid to go in. They don't go in. God brings them to this land. Now, if you know the record, these guys have no reason to be afraid. No reason, because everything that God did to get them out of Egypt in the first place should have just settled it for them. All the different miracles that they saw. And then when they get out there, time and time again, 10 times up to this point, or including this point of when they're right outside the promised land, God proves to them that he'll take care of them. First of all, every day they travel with a huge pillar of a cloud going before them during the day, and if that's not impressive enough, a pillar of fire at night. I'm thinking if I saw that every day, I'd think God will take care of me. He's with me. And he gives them water, and he gives them manna, and he gives them quail, and all these different things. And yet in this journey, they're afraid. They're afraid. And because of that fear, they don't walk right into that promised land. And so you know what happens? They travel some more. They travel for another 40 years wandering aimlessly in the desert. They didn't wander aimlessly because Moses had a worse sense of direction than I do. They wandered aimlessly because of their unbelief. Because of their unbelief. And because of that fear, they just wandered in their journey. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 1. Well, they finally, after wandering around for 40 years, and basically that first generation dying off, and their children now, they come back to that place they could have gone into much earlier. And they do enter that land. It's Joshua that leads them into it. And then after they've established that land, after they've won the cities, after they've set up life in this land, and it's proven to be everything that God told them it would be, near the end of Joshua's days, he calls all of Israel back to the place where they first crossed over into Shechem. And he calls them to make a decision. In Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 3. And it came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month. Oh, no, that's not where I'm going. Yeah, it is where I'm going. I'm just getting ahead of myself here. Go to chapter 7. Chapter 7, verse 6. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love upon you, nor choose you, because you are more in number than any people, for you were the fewest of all people, but because the Lord loved you, and because he would keep the oath which he hath sworn unto your fathers, hath the Lord brought you out with a mighty hand, and redeemed you out of the house of bondmen from the hand of Pharaoh king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord thy God, he is God, the faithful God which keepeth covenant and mercy with them that love him, and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations. Look at verse 12. Wherefore it shall come to pass, if ye hearken to these judgments, and keep and do them, that the Lord thy God shall keep unto thee the covenant and the mercy which he sware unto thy fathers. And he will love thee and bless thee and multiply thee. He will also bless the fruit of thy womb and the fruit of thy land, thy corn and thy wine and thine oil, the increase of thy kine and the flocks of thy sheep, in the land which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee. Verse 14. Thou shalt be blessed above all people. There shall not be male or female barren among you, or among your cattle. And the Lord will take away from thee all sickness, and will put none of the evil diseases of Egypt, which thou knowest, upon thee, but will lay them upon all that hate thee. I said it was Joshua. This is not that record. We may get to that later. But this is when Moses is calling them and telling them as they're about to go into that land that if they will be faithful to keep God's word, then not only will they inherit this land, not only will they have that, but they will have all these wonderful promises, that God will take care of them, that God will bless them, that their vineyards will be fruitful, that their cattle will be fruitful, that they themselves will be fruitful, that they won't suffer disease, that they won't suffer all the things that the other people do, that God will take care of them and bless them with an incredible life. That's the journey that God called them to. And so long as Israel fulfilled their end of it, so long as they were faithful to do what God called them to do here, to keep his word, then their lives were just absolutely blessed. Then this land produced for them, and their enemies couldn't touch them, and nothing could harm them. God's called us to exceeding great and precious promises. He's given us a promised land, heaven that we're citizens of already, but also all of the promises that he's given to us to enjoy. And God will do so much more for us than what he promised to Israel as we stay faithful as well. There's another kind of journey that you find about in the Old Testament. Turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 1. This isn't the journey of a nation, and it's not a physical journey, but rather this is the journey of one man. The man's named Solomon. And his journey is a journey of searching. It's a journey in life that many people take, a journey to understand life and what life is all about. In chapter 1, in verse 12, it says, the preacher, and Solomon is the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. And I gave my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of man to be exercised therewith. He said he looked at everything in life to try to figure it out. And that's common to man. It's common for men to do that. It's common for men, this sore travail, this hard work, to try to figure out what life's really about. He goes on to say, verse 14, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. It's not words that a lot of us use, vanity and vexation of spirit. It means emptiness. Vanity is emptiness. It's all empty. It's all empty. And vexation of spirit means it's just troubling to the soul. When you look at life, when people look at life, and they try to figure it out, and they examine, and they do self-examinations, and they try all these different things, as Solomon does in Ecclesiastes. It's what you end up coming to. Solomon, Ecclesiastes is the record of the thoughts and emotions of a man searching for the truth. That's the key to understanding that book. And Solomon does that. He goes trying out everything. We'll read a little bit of it. And everything that he looks at and everything that he examines, he keeps coming back to the same conclusion. It's all empty. It's all empty. It didn't take me too long to figure that one out in life. I was 19 by the time I figured it out. Some people it takes longer, but it is all empty. Without God, life is empty. And it's all just troubling to the soul. He goes on to say, verse 15, that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. No matter how much you try, no matter how many times you think you fixed it, that which is crooked can't be made straight. And that which is wanting can't be numbered. That which you still need, that which life still needs, people still need. You can't even count it. There's no end to it. No matter what progress you make. We've made great progress in the world, haven't we? Man sure thinks so. He pats himself on the back with all the great discoveries he's made. 1960-something or other, Lyndon B. Johnson was going to stamp out end poverty in the United States. How long's that been now? How's that going for us? How much have we stamped out poverty in the world, sickness in the world? And with all the money of Bill Gates, it's still there, isn't it? You're never going to do that. You're never going to fix that which is crooked. You're never going to make it straight, and you're never going to put an end. And you fix one thing, and, it's like, it's the way I feel about this house sometimes, You fix this, and now that's wrong, No sooner fixing the refrigerator than you got to fix the washing machine or whatever. Well, life's a lot worse than that one. We'll keep reading. Verse 16. I commune with my own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate. I have gotten more wisdom than all they which have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I gave my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit. Whether I lived in wisdom or whether I thought, to heck with that, with heck with doing the right thing, I'll just instead be crazy. I'll be crazy, I'll be wild, and either way, it was all just vanity. Verse 18. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. I know a family. My goodness. By every account, they ought to be deliriously, easy for me to say, crazy happy. They have the jobs that if you look it up, of the most satisfying careers that a person could have, They have the careers. I won't give too much information so you're not trying to figure it out. They have the careers that are number 2 on the list of most satisfying, and they do nothing but complain about it. They have more money than all of us put together, I imagine. I don't know how much, Mike's doing pretty well right now. I don't know. Now, they have crazy money, but they're not happy. They've got a wonderful family. They live in this beautiful house. They have the respect, the admiration of so many people. But they're not happy. They're not happy. Knowledge itself doesn't bring happiness. Money doesn't bring happiness. These are the things that Solomon looked and examined, and he keeps on recognizing this is not where it's at. We'll read a bit more. Chapter 2. I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruit. I made pools of water to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. I got me servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle, above all that were in Jerusalem before me. He had greater wealth than any man that ever lived in Israel before him. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasures of kings and of the provinces. I got me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men, musical instruments, and that of all sorts. The best entertainment of the time. All of that he gathered together. So he had all this wealth and this entertainment and everything that you could think would make you happy. And again, he's the king. He's the king. He gets to tell everybody else what to do. Isn't that what people want? Power, wealth, enjoyment, pleasures. He had it all. Verse 9. So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was the portion of all my labor. Sounds like he's got it made, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Sounds like he's got what everybody wants, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, everything that I worked so hard to get, and behold, all was empty and troubling to the soul. It was all vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. Wow. You can take that same journey if you want. You can find out if he was right or wrong and waste your life doing it. But this is not just Solomon's own personal journey or journal of his life. This is the Word of God. This is God telling us, you don't need to go through all this. Somebody a lot smarter than you, a lot more powerful than you, has already done it. And you should take his advice. Continuing in Ecclesiastes chapter 5. In verse 10 it says, He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. This is also vanity. People think that, once they get the money, that they'll be happy, but they aren't. When goods increase, verse 11, they are increased that eat them. Everybody knows that one, right? The government will make sure of it. And what good is there to the owners thereof, save the beholding of them with their eyes? They get to look at this. And for most people, you get to a certain point, it's just numbers on a page. The sleep of a laboring man is sweet, whether he eat little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not suffer him to sleep. There is a sore evil which I have seen under the sun, namely, riches kept for the owners thereof to their hurt. But those riches perish by evil travail, and he begetteth the son, and there is nothing in his hand. As he came forth of his mother's womb, Naked shall he return to go as he came, and shall take nothing of his labor, which he may carry away in his hand. You can't take it with you, as everybody knows. It goes on and throughout this chapter to talk more about the folly of riches. And, it's one thing for God to bless you, but if it's just you trying to acquire these things by yourself, well, then that's just empty. As is all of life. And when you go through all of Ecclesiastes, and he looks at many, many things throughout this entire book, of examining the different ways that people endeavor to live, the different journeys they take, the different ways and means that they travel through life, that all of it keeps on coming back to this is not where it's at. This is not going to bring you where you think it will. In chapter 12, then, he comes to the answer. Now, this whole chapter, it begins with verse 1, remember now thy Creator in thy days of thy youth, and then it goes to this very long Eastern idiom talking about when you are getting old. I won't read that because, some of you may start to think about, that is true. Well, now, yes, my legs aren't what they used to be or whatever. It's a funny thing about age, though, Some people, they get to the minute they have a couple of gray hairs, they think that they should find a rocking chair and not move from it. And others are in their 70s and are presidents of the United States. So, it's all a matter of attitude, I guess. Whether you're young or old, there's a lot that you can accomplish for God, and that's what he talks about here. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12, we'll pick it up in verse 10. The preacher sought to find out acceptable words, and that which was written was upright, even words of truth. He finds acceptable words. He finds words of truth, not through his own discovery, not through his own seeking out, but rather through what words God gives him. The words of the wise, verse 11, are as goads, and as nails fastened by the masters of assemblies, which are given from one shepherd. A goad. There's a term that's still used. Most people have no idea what it is. He goaded him into something or other. A goad was a board with nails through it, and it was used as a cattle prod. They didn't have the electric ones. They used to just give them a whack with this board with nails in it. Not, they implanted in them, but they just give them a tap with that, and as they kick against it, then they were kicking against the pricks, which is another verse. But that was to just get them moving. It says that the words of God, they move us in the right direction if you let them, if you don't kick against the pricks. Verse 12. And further by these, my son, be admonished. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. That was one of my theme verses when I was in college. Making books, there's no end. You can write. He could go on and on and on what he's talking about. And much study is a weariness of the flesh, and that's not just talking about cramming for finals. It's talking about much study of life. It just makes you tired. You try to figure out life, and at some point, it just makes you tired. Verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Let's get to the end. Let's get to the final word on the matter. Here it is. You ready for it? This is really complicated. This is really tough. Fear God, respect God, and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Boom. Isn't life hard? Isn't that tough to do? Respect God, honor God, and keep his word, for that's the whole duty of man. That's it. That's all you got to think about. That's all you got to really do. If you do that, the rest will take care of itself. Well, it doesn't mean you don't have to think about what shirt to put on or whether you should, do this job or that. But if you do it with God, if you travel with Him, if you don't try to figure out life by yourself, if you don't go after it all by yourself, if you walk and travel with Him. You know, Lewis and Clark, they had a tough time. They had some guide, some Indians with a name that, Lord help me, I'd try to pronounce, a woman, Sacagawea. Easy for me to say. Sacagawea, is that her name? Okay. You know, and she helped. But boy, God's our guide, and He really knows the terrain. Verse 14, for God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. The preacher searched for wisdom and truth, and because he did, he got it all. He looked, you know, and you go back to the start of Solomon's life, you know, God comes to him, great record, when he's very young, when he first takes over the kingdom. And God says, Solomon, whatever you want, because I loved your father so much, whatever you want, ask for it and you got it. You know, a lot of people dream of that, you know. It's better than some genie, right? Whatever you want, whatever you want. You know, if God came to you right now, what would you answer that to? Oh. Well, you know what Solomon asked for? Wisdom. Wisdom to take care of God's people. Because Solomon knew he was in over his head. He knew that God's people were so great. And to take care of them the way that he should. Man, this was too big a responsibility to try to do on his own. And so he asked God to help him. You know, some of us have responsibilities for families, responsibilities for other people. And even if it's just trying to be responsible for your own life, it's too much to try to do on your own. Well, Solomon was smart enough to ask for wisdom. And God said, you know what? Because you did that, and you didn't ask for a long life, and you didn't ask for riches, and you didn't ask for all this other stuff, I'm going to give you what you asked for. But I'm also going to give you everything you didn't. He didn't even have to ask for that stuff. Because his heart was in the right place, God gave him all the rest. Look at Matthew chapter 7. What would you ask for? And are you asking? Are you searching? Are you seeking? Are you endeavoring to take that journey? To discover what riches God has for you, to explore life that God has given. In Matthew 7, verse 7, it says, ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. For every one that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened. You have to seek. You have to explore. You have to search. You have to do that if you're going to walk into that promised land. Had Israel stayed where they were in Egypt, they would have remained in bondage their entire lives and the lives of all that followed them. But they asked, and then they walked until they got fearful. What keeps people? We know from the record of Genesis and Exodus what kept Israel from entering the promised land. What keeps people from walking into that promised land God has for them, from walking into all the treasures that God has laid out for us to discover? There's a number of things. The first one is indecision. Look at Joshua chapter 24, the verse I thought I was going to earlier. In Joshua 24, this is that record where Joshua calls them after they've gone in and claimed the land, and he calls them at the end of his days to remind them of something and to make a choice. In Joshua 24, verse 14, now therefore fear the Lord. That's what we just read in Ecclesiastes. And fear doesn't mean be afraid of God. It means respect him. Recognize that he's bigger than you are, that he's greater than you are. And serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which our fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve. Whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. He's calling them to make a choice. Choose you this day. And there's a great chapter entitled that in a book, Order My Steps in Thy Word, Volume 5 of Studies in Abundant Living by Victor Paul Wierl. I'd recommend for you to read it sometime. But Joshua calls them to choose, to make a decision. Because so long as people blow hot and cold, they never travel. So long as you can't make up your mind if you should go east or west, north or south, stay put or move forward, then you just stay stuck. You just stay stuck. All of those people. I mentioned at the last teaching having visited Ellis Island, and boy, it hit me. Man, what a brave thing. And again, some of them may have made that journey to a new country, a new land out of desperation. But no matter what a brave thing to travel across an ocean and leave everything that you knew behind and start off on a new life. It's always risky. It's always a bit scary, isn't it, to try something new, to travel a different road. Mm-hmm. But if you don't, if my ancestors hadn't, they would have starved to death probably in Ireland looking for potatoes that were rotten. Make up your mind. In Matthew 6, verse 33, it says, But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Just like Solomon. Put God first. Choose him. Choose that. Make that decision, and God will take care of all the rest. Look at James chapter 1. James chapter 1 also encourages us to not halt between two opinions. James chapter 1, verse 5. If any of you lack wisdom, and wisdom, that doesn't mean that, you've got certain degrees or that type of thing. Wisdom is the right application of knowledge. It's not enough even just to have the knowledge of God's Word. You have to know how to apply it in life. You can know the entire book. You can have taken every class 10 times. You can have it memorized backwards and forwards. But if you never get around to figuring out how to live it, if you never get around to applying it, it doesn't do you any good. But if you lack wisdom, if you can't figure out how to make this stuff work in your life, you know what you do? If any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not. He doesn't say, what are you bothering me for? And it shall be given him. But let him ask in what? Faith, in believing. Nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. You can't be this day, I'm all for it, and the next day, no. You can't be double-minded. You have to be fixed. Stay put. Stay put. The double-minded man is like the guy just tossed around the waves. And that person won't receive anything, but the person that stays fixed, you're getting someplace. Tossed to and fro. What keeps a ship from just being taken wherever the wind wants it to go? A rudder. A rudder. It's that simple. Put a ship in the sea without a rudder, and what happens to it? Does it ever get to where it wants to go? No. You need a rudder. You need a rudder. The Word of God's got to be that rudder. It's got to be God that is the direction in your life. Well, the second reason, and it leads right out of what we said, is doubt, worry, fear. Look at Hebrews chapter 3. The second reason people don't take that journey or arrive at the destination is they're like Israel. They're afraid. And that's what's referenced in Hebrews chapter 3, verse 16. For some, when they had heard, did provoked God. Howbeit not all that came out of Egypt by Moses. But with whom was he, meaning God, grieved for 40 years? Who was God mad at? Who did he say, well, you guys are just going to wander around for 40 years? Was it not with them that had sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness? And their sin was that fearfulness to go in. That's what it's specifically referring to. It's referring to that time that they were afraid to go into the promised land. Verse 18. And to whom sware he that they would not enter into his rest, but to them that believed not? So we see that they could not enter in because of what? Unbelief. They couldn't enter into that promised land because of their unbelief. That's what kept them from reaching their destination. The third reason people don't enter into that promised land, never discover the treasures, is because they become too entangled in life. Look at 2 Timothy chapter 2. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 4. No man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who hath chosen him to be a soldier. A soldier cannot still afford to get all entangled with the affairs of this life. They have to be able to move. And it's often been said when reading this verse that if you want to travel far and fast, you have to travel how? Light. If you want to travel far and fast, you have to travel light. You cannot get all entangled in the affairs of this life, or you'll never find time for the affairs of God. That's the fact. That's a fact. If you let it, if God is like, well, let me see where I can figure, I got a lot to do. Let me, see if I got room in my agenda for God. You'll never find that room. There'll never be that opening in your schedule. There never will be. If everything else takes precedence, if everything else is a priority, if work, if taking care of the kids, if fixing the house, if doing all this other stuff, if that is first, you'll never get time for God. Doesn't mean that you ignore the kids. Well, sorry, kids, you're on your own. I just got the things of God to think about. No. But keep first things first. Keep it straight. Keep in life what's supposed to be first. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. Seek ye first. And then you'll figure out the rest. But if you're trying to figure out how to fit that in with everything else, well then, somehow you never get around to time for prayer. You never get around for time for reading the Bible. You'll never find time to go to fellowship. Well, you'll be too tired. And you know what it's like for when it comes to this stuff? And I'm thinking how much Shauna can appreciate this with working with people with exercise. The fellow that, boy, I wish I could exercise, but I just don't have the energy to do it. I have so much to do, I never have enough energy. Well, you know what the answer to that is? If you exercise, you'll get more energy, right? If you don't, you only get weaker and less energy. I'd exercise, but these things are too heavy to pick up. As soon as I get stronger, I'll start picking up these dumbbells. Well, it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. You've got things backwards. You got it backwards. You got to start exercising. Exercise thyself unto godliness. Put God first. Do those things. And you know what? You won't be so worn out and tired and exhausted and mentally spent and physically spent to be able to. But if you don't make time for God, you'll struggle through everything else with very little left in the tank to get anywhere. The next reason why people never reach it is they're simply not willing to pay the price of the passage. The reason they don't get to the new destination is they won't pay the price for the passage to get there. Look at Matthew chapter 8. Matthew 8, Jesus Christ, and if you think I'm kind of tough on people, see what he says. Matthew chapter 8, verse 19. And a certain scribe came and said unto him, Master, I will follow thee whithersoever thou goest. boy, I just heard you teach and I'm excited and I will go wherever you go. I'll follow you. I'll be your disciple. And Jesus Christ was so impressed with the man. And he was so... And Jesus said unto him, all right, will you really? Well, let me tell you what you're getting in for. The foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. I don't even have a certain dwelling place. You want to follow me? Are you ready? Are you really ready to do that? Verse 21. And another of his disciples said unto him, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. And Jesus said unto him, follow me and let the dead bury their dead. Now, it's not quite as harsh as that sounds, like the guy's father just died and he was like, won't even let to go to the funeral. This refers to a whole Eastern custom where the custom was the oldest son would spend his whole life just waiting for his father to die because he was supposed to take care of lead the funeral procession. But this is one of many places where people came to Jesus Christ. And they came and they said they wanted to follow, but they had some good reason why they actually felt they couldn't. But Jesus Christ's answer is always the same. You know, anybody that's not willing to put me first, that's not willing to forsake all, they're not worthy. They're not worthy. Again, it doesn't mean that all that other stuff just we should ignore or that is not importance. But it's the difference between trying to live life on our own, with our own limited resources, strength, and so forth, or trusting God and doing it with him. But you got to keep God first. You got to keep him first. Well, the last reason why people never reach their destination is because they faint along the way. They faint along the way. They were traveling, and then the road just got a bit long for them. Look at Hebrews chapter 12. In Hebrews 12, verse 1 says, wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses. What does that mean? It's referring to the previous chapter, chapter 11, where it talks about all these wonderful examples that we have in God's Word. These examples of men like Abraham that left his father's country and traveled into a place. Men like Moses, men like Joseph. These great believers of old and what they did. Looking at that, looking at their example, continuing in verse 1, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us. Travel light. Lay off the weights. Lay aside all those things that burden you down, whether it's the entanglements of life or the mental weights, the things that somehow are hard to let go of, that keep you from moving ahead the way you could. Let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Run with patience. It's a marathon. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Too many people are sprinters and not marathon runners. They're real fast for a real short time. I've met so many people like that, you know. You get so impressed at what a fast runner they are, how great they are, but they just don't understand. It's not just a sprint, it's a marathon. You've got to have some endurance. You've got to have some endurance in life. You've got to run with patience. That you just have that stamina, that willpower, that determination, those guts to keep going. Even when you're tired, even when it hurts, even when you feel like you just can't go on, you keep going. Verse 2, how do you do it? Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him, consider Jesus Christ, that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds. Think about him. Think about the price he paid. so that we could have a life more than abundant. Think about that so you don't faint, so you don't quit, so you don't give up. You can do everything else, but boy, if you quit before you get to the finish line, you still don't get to the finish line. If you quit before you reach the promised land, you still never walk in. If you're traveling through life's journey and you quit too early, before you ever get to the destination, you never enjoy it. There's a little record, it's a true one, that I always enjoy when I think about something like this. It's the story of a woman named Florence Chadwick. Some of you have heard this. She was the first woman to swim the Catalina, whatever it's called, channel, I guess. When she looked ahead, Florence Chadwick saw nothing but a solid wall of fog. Her body was numb. She had been swimming for nearly 16 hours. Already, she was the first woman to swim the English Channel in both directions. Now, at age 34, her goal was to become the first woman to swim from Catalina Island to the California coast. On that 4th of July morning in 1952, the sea was like an ice bath, and the fog was so dense she could hardly see her support boats. Sharks cruised toward her lone figure, only to be driven away by rifle shots. Against the frigid grip of the sea, she struggled on, hour after hour, while millions watched on national television. Alongside Florence in one of the boats, her mother and her trainer offered encouragement. They told her it wasn't much farther, but all she could see was fog. They urged her not to quit. She never had until then. With only a half mile to go, she asked to be pulled out. Still thawing her chilled body several hours later, she told a reporter, "Look, I'm not excusing myself, but if I could have seen land, I might have made it." It was not fatigue or even the cold water that defeated her. It was the fog. She was unable to see her goal. 2 months later, she tried again. This time, despite the same dense fog, she swam with her faith intact and her goal clearly pictured in her mind. She knew that somewhere behind that fog was land, and this time she made it. Florence Chadwick became the first woman to swim the Catalina Channel, eclipsing the men's record by 2 hours. You can't lose sight of the goal. You can't quit. You have to persevere until you reach your destination. God bless you.